Good morning, everybody. It's your favorite aspiring revolutionary here, a wandering author, reminding you that we are all the authors of our own lives. As always, my message remains the same. Spend less, live more, earn your freedom with frugality. And look at just how beautiful that water is right back there. So that's Traverse Lake, I believe is the name of it. We are at the Swanson Preserve, which is part of the Leelanau Conservancy, and I gotta tell you, I am astonished by just how clear all the water is. Now, I was hoping to record my song Surpassed by Creation at Sleeping Bear Dune National Lakeshore, but I did not anticipate just how crowded it was going to be. I'm going to tell you guys, it was literally like going to Disney World. I did go there, but it's a little, oh wow, look at that tree. That's pretty interesting looking. But it was, Sleeping Bear Dunes was like shoulder to shoulder in tons of families. So I will find somewhere else that is equally scenic and beautiful to record my song. Today we're going to talk about the bursting of a bubble, and as part of our analysis of the Great Recession and what caused it. So before, leading up to the 2008 crisis, U.S. housing prices had climbed almost continuously for like 4 decades. People, I can even remember as a kid myself hearing that, like, you know, housing prices always go up, right? Like it's a sure investment. So when prices began to dip in the 2005 to 2012 eras, homeowners began to abandon their mortgages. And this led to a run on the shadow banking system, essentially. This is what we call the subprime mortgage crisis. Now, ultimately, this led to a halting of bank lending to businesses, and consumers started to pay down their debts instead of spend more money, which is horrible for the economy. The U.S. shadow banking system, which is composed of non-depository institutions, so like a commercial bank, you put consumers have to put money into it, deposits, right? Investment banks don't run that way. Prior to the crisis, the U.S. shadow banking system had grown large enough to rival depository institutions, but did not have the same financial oversights or regulations governing them. So they were just kind of going a little hog wild, I suppose. Now, in 2007, subprime mortgages started to lose, losses started to mount. And before this, the Lehman Brothers and similar companies were marketing these mortgage-backed assets as an alternative to U.S. bonds. They earned more money for the amount that you had to invest in them than you would earn if you bought a treasury, right? So on the 15th of September in 2008, Lehman Brothers collapsed entirely and triggered a run on the shadow banking system. Businesses started trying to withdraw their deposits, and it triggered the crisis, a complete meltdown of our financial institutions. And I just got to tell you, it's surprising how much Michigan reminds me of Florida, to be honest. Similar to Florida, like this is almost identical to what trails look like if you go to like the inner parts of Central Florida, like Orlando and all that. It's interesting because Michigan's also a peninsula. It's just way further north, obviously. But the too big to fail mantra, you know, it led to a ton of different bailouts, TARP funds. Billions of dollars were transferred from the public to corporate institutions, just straight from our pocket to theirs, right? Consumers are always the ones that lose, as always. Income inequality in the following decade increased in 70% of all counties measured. So the poor people are the ones that lost, working class folks like us, and the wealthy people got wealthier than ever thanks to this crisis. Now, fortunately, our government decided to investigate the causes of this, and they put together the Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission, which held, I want to say it was 4 Democrats, 6 Republicans. Anyways, it was a bipartisan affair. Both sides decided to look into what caused this horrible, and look at how beautiful this little thing right here is. So they looked into what caused it, and they came up with some pretty startling conclusions. So number one, there was widespread failure in financial regulations. So basically, not having any rules on the shadow banking system came back to bite us in the ass. Color me surprised, right? There was also a dramatic breakdown in corporate governance. So the people who ran these companies were absent from the wheel, so to speak. Also, not too surprising if you ask me. Third, there was excessive borrowing and risk taking by U.S. households and by Wall Street, which is funny that they cite that as one of the reasons why everything failed, but then they also cite that people paying down their debts is a reason why the recession started. So it's like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, you know? And finally, and this is my favorite one, my favorite conclusion from our government's inquiry into what caused this crisis: ill-prepared policy advisors who lacked a complete understanding of the systems they oversaw and systemic breaches of accountability and ethics at all levels. Let me repeat that. Ill-prepared policy advisors who lacked a complete understanding of the systems they oversaw and systemic breaches of accountability and ethics at all levels. So, basically, the people who were supposed to be watching out for us were watching out for themselves, and they did not care what happened to everybody else. Now, there's definitely much more that we can go into, and we will go into it, about the 2008 crisis, but I've got to gather more content. I do have a few other things I'd like to talk about. Oh yeah, this morning, so last night I stayed at Grass Lake State Campground. Actually slept in a tent. Best sleep I've had since I've been on this trip, right? Sleeping in my car is kind of painful for my neck and back, but when you have an actual tent, you almost have like a bedroom to yourself, right? Now, I would get a hotel, but I'm trying to go literally all the way up to Michigan, which I made it. And now, by the end of next week, I'm supposed to be in Mississippi, so I could go to the Neshoba County Fair. And I've got several other stops along the way. Plus, I still need to record that song. So, the issue is whenever I started to leave the campground this morning, I totally got my car stuck on top of this stump that was like totally from outside. I should have looked before I started moving the car. From inside the car, the stump was completely invisible. There was no way that you could tell, but it literally got underneath the front two tires, and like the car just would not move. Fortunately, there was a very kind Michiganer that was fishing nearby, and we both used our jacks to get the car lifted up, and then we were able to push it and dislodge it. Obviously, got a little late start to the day, but yeah, so moving forward, oh wow, look at this little creek. That's very cute. Very, very nice. And it goes out to the water over here where it empties into the lake. And look at this sand, even the sand and stuff. It's very similar to Florida here in Michigan. Michigan is incredibly similar to Florida. But if you also notice, I'm wearing sleeves. I'm wearing a beanie. It's not hot at all. It's like in the actually early 70s, low 70s. Yesterday it peaked at like 68 degrees. It's mid-July. That's pretty cold. But moving forward, we will talk about subprime loans, the crisis itself, what exactly, I'll go into details on that. We'll talk about the actual shadow banking system. I know I mentioned it today, but I didn't go into too many details about it. And we'll also talk about bailouts. Before I sign off, I just want to talk about the impact of how we use our time. I was talking to somebody, and they mentioned how, you know, they work from 10 to 6, which is a dang good schedule for an adult, right? But then, like, I think about it, and man, bro, if you actually have to work 10 to 6, that really leaves you hardly any time to do anything else. I mean, it reminds me, I was reading online, and people were talking about how the best musicians are always in their teens or early 20s whenever they become popular. And that is true, but I actually don't think it's because older people are poor musicians. I think it's that once you get kind of past 21 or 22, almost everyone in our society is kind of stuck and committed to a 10 to 6 schedule, 9 to 5 schedule, or even worse. So, in other words, unless these people decide that the only two things they're going to do is work on their passion project and their regular job, they aren't going to have much of another life, you know? But if you aren't satisfied with that, then you do have to do what it takes in order to carve out a path of your own. That's a whole big part of the reason why I'm doing all the stuff that I am doing. And fortunately, I've reconnected with a ton of people. I was in a toxic relationship for a long time, totally isolated myself, which did not help me out at all. In fact, it made me mentally ill, let's just put it that way. I'm doing much better today, as you could tell by the fact that I am basically traveling across the country like a homeless person. Yeah, no, so seriously, just look at, you can tell these people, this nature preserve had quite a bit of work put into it. Yeah, also out here in Michigan, you see all these roads with these signs. They're like dirt roads, but they have these signs called that say seasonal road on them, right? So I guess there's a lot of cross-country skiing and stuff that happens up here. The winters must be a lot colder than the ones that I'm used to back home. But yeah, so that's pretty much all I have for you guys today. Our government's inquiry into the subprime crisis concluded that basically humans are selfish and that's why it happened. Which I agree with, actually. So we'll talk about the actual mechanics of the subprime loan crisis, the bailouts, how much money did we spend to keep these companies afloat and powerful, and the shadow banking system. You know, how are the financial elites moving their money around behind closed doors? As always, my message remains the same: spend less, live more, earn your freedom with frugality. This is totally free to adventure in here, and it's a wandering author here, reminding you that we are all the authors of our own lives. What are you guys doing in order to inspire, uplift, and empower your community today? Because this world isn't changing unless we all do our part, and you can count on me to do mine daily. Till next time, I love y'all.